welcome back to Film Study. It's Monday night when we're recording, so it's time to break down the defense. Ken McKusick, how you doing?
Life's good, Josh. How about you?
I'm good. I'm getting ready to take a trip and head on over to Indianapolis tomorrow.
Oh, what are you going there for?
Work. Apparently, some people still have work conferences. I don't know. It's the first time I've had to go to a work conference in many, many months.
All right. That's Maureen's hometown, of course.
Okay.
And the town that stole the Colts. I've forgiven her personally.
Well, yeah, I checked. It was still cheaper to fly than to take a Mayflower.
All right. That's still a little too fresh. 36 years, 37 years. I guess it's been 36.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not ready to laugh about it just yet.
Well, come on. We've had 2 Super Bowls. It's I know it's a generational thing. And and Dan's on the line with us. Dan, you look a little bit younger. I don't think you cheered for the Colts or cried when they left in Baltimore.
I don't think I was conceived of that. I wasn't even conceived back then.
All right, I was at least 3 or 4 years old then. So,
Dan, I have trouble always pronouncing your last name. Of course, the Sunrider, Dan.
Oyefusi.
And that's why I said Dan.
Good choice. Dan, I know we've had this conversation before, but you a Baltimore boy?
Yeah. I grew up in Baltimore County, specifically. Yeah.
All right, very cool. All right, that's good. Then we'll know we'll have these local roots to refer to.
Well, yeah, Dan, congrats for signing up for the defense episode this week. I feel like this is going to be a whole lot more exciting
Most definitely.
than tomorrow's breakdown.
Yeah, offense is going to be a rough one, but hey.
Well, and isn't that the broad takeaway from this game, that the Ravens, like Lamar did not play well, but the Ravens still managed to dominate the game.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, it just kind of speaks to the team in itself. There's some games where even last year where the defense was not at its best, but the offense was so high powered, and it's the same. It was the same on Sunday with the Bengals, where you can just blitz, and Wink was kind of that was classic Wink right there.
Right.
So it was really a dominant all around effort from the defense.
Yeah, hyper aggressive, that's for sure. Really did a lot more of a scheme than he had been doing.
Right. And now, Ken, as a guy that breaks everything down and every play, all the way down to the kneel downs, how much does losing the shutout bother you?
A little bit. All right. And the way the Ravens lost this shutout was kind of a annoying way to me. It doesn't bother me. The Ravens did not deserve a shutout in this game. They played too poorly offensively, threw too many interceptable passes in this game. They really didn't deserve a shutout. But then the Bengals got the ball with 8 minutes to go, and I figure the Ravens have what I call shutout insurance. Is they have a 4-touchdown lead. The Bengals aren't supposed to try to kick a field goal, period, because it's just not done in those situations. On 4th down, 4th and 8, 4th and 17. In fact, a lot of times there's no control group for these things when you're looking at football analytics, but on November 26, 2006, feels like 1906 almost at this point, the Ravens led the Pittsburgh Steelers by an identical 27-0 score in the closing 2 minutes. And the Steelers faced 4th and 17 at the 30 with a chance to break the shutout with a field goal. They went for it through an interception, and that's the way it's supposed to be done. And I can't remember the last time I saw anybody break a shutout with a field goal like this, the way they did. But they drove up the field, 11 runs and 2 passes. So that tells you, they've basically given up on the game. They just were playing for one good drive. They ran the ball on, 3rd and 6, right, the play before, Dan? Does that sound right?
Yeah, it was a mix-in handoff, and you just thought, all right, maybe they're setting up for another last-ditch effort to get in the end zone, and they bring the field goal unit out, and yeah, it's funny that you say that. I think there was a Pro Football Reference. It was like this was one of only 2 instances where a team had kicked a field goal to avoid a shutout, like in the last a minute of the game. It was
that's great. I want to hear that. I want to see that. You have a tweet that came out on it then?
I'd have to find it. But
I'll look for it while you guys are breaking down the game.
Love to hear.
I'll try to have it by the end, because it's a weird thing, because as a fan, it doesn't make you, if you're a Bengals fan, it doesn't make you feel any better. It can't make a player feel any better, right?
Right. The equivalent is a bunt base hit to break up the no-hitter in the 9th inning. And, it doesn't make the team feel any better about doing it. The fans of the home team don't even like it. If it's a game-tying home run, maybe they love the fact that the no-hitter got broken up, but they don't really want even a no-hitter to be broken up by a single, most home fans, I think. They anyway, just kind of chaps me here a little bit, but we'll get through this.
All right. Well, one more thing before we really break into the game, and it was last week we adjusted and had to talk about the COVID news moving the Steelers-Ravens game. Then Sunday they kind of put out a press release. It seemed like it came out during the games. We're kind of buried in there that they're shifting all types of games around. How does this affect the Ravens? Their games aren't affected, but the schedule's affected.
Yeah, the schedule, for starters, the schedule's lost a lot of flexibility. Once they've moved this many games and they had to move a bunch to get a second matchup the way they wanted it, then there'll be real trouble if there's another game that has to be moved. So they're at a point where they're going to have to start adding weeks and doing things to get the schedule finished.
Did the NFL make a mistake by not planning ahead of time, like a 2-bye-week season?
Or three.
Something to bring in some flexibility? Where they tried to play it like a normal season without the preseason?
Mistake. I mean, they told everybody, I think, up front that there was a good chance they were going to have to add weeks to the season as it went on, and people are going to have to be flexible. So I wouldn't be surprised if they add up by week 11, week 12, week 13 kind of thing, and then one at the end of the season to try and get through as many of these games as possible. And in football, relatively few games have zero impact on the playoffs all the way to the final week. There'll be a handful in the final week that don't, but it's not that many.
Right, but if they're going to extend the season, they're going to want to do that like this week, next week, pretty soon, because Florida and Tampa has already announced they can fill that place up for the Super Bowl.
Terrible idea.
I'm not getting into the politics of it. I'm just stating the fact that the NFL can make a whole lot of money Super Bowl weekend in Tampa. So you think they're going to want to nail that week down at some point soon.
Yeah. But Dan, what's your take on this at the Sun? Do you guys talk about what's going to happen with the COVID season?
I mean, honestly, I think if we've learned anything over the past 6-7 months, we know that everything is very fluid. It's very hard to plan long term, because what you plan for in a week or two might be scrapped. So we've really taken it as like a week by week approach in terms of everything from travel to what we're writing and whatnot. It is a little tougher. Everyone has to adjust. Not only the teams but the people that cover the teams. And it really is like when you hear coaches. It's kind of coach speak when you talk about we're taking it day by day. That's true for them, and it's true for us as well.
Are you traveling for the games now? That was your question too, Josh?
Yeah, same question.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go to Houston. Only Jonas did. I'm probably not going to go to Philly just because it's different with no locker room access. You're essentially just watching from the press box there, so the reward isn't as much there anymore.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Well, let's get into it. Let's get into the fun side of this game, the defense.
Right. I'll just start us off here. A very complete defensive effort in this game. They succeeded at every level of the defense in playing well. Obviously, the defensive line played well, controlled gaps, did the things they were supposed to do. I thought the linebackers all played pretty well, with maybe one exception, and the secondary was terrific.
Yeah, I agree as well. I mean, I know this was the type of game where you're facing a rookie quarterback, you're facing an offensive line that's not that good, so you want to make them uncomfortable as possible. They threw the whole textbook at him, and they showed early on that they weren't able to adjust to it, and they just kept on going, whether it was the DB blitzes or some exotic looks and whatnot. I mean, when you see the amount of players that got a sack, that shows they were just getting everybody in on the fun.
Right. I think there was definitely some scheming for that. I want to get back to that a little bit later in terms of our pass rush talk. But before we get into that, one of the surprising things about the inactive list was that there were 2 defensive linemen on it. Broderick Washington didn't suit up, and Justin Ellis didn't. That left the Ravens with just 4 defensive linemen. One of them is Matabike, who's coming back for his first action. So I guess they were fairly comfortable that the knee was good.
Yeah. I mean, this was a guy that they were really eager to get in the fold, a 3rd round pick who was coming on strong in training camp until that late knee injury. So yeah, I mean, they obviously had a lot of faith in him, and obviously given the personnel of the Bengals, they have a good trio, kind of quartet of wide receivers. Kind of wanted to stack up more on defensive backs in this instance.
Right. The Bengals are a team that obviously knows the Ravens pretty well. I was a little fearful that they might really try and go heavy in this game and try and wear out a very limited defensive line because it's something that can be done. Now, not everybody can just line up and play power football.
Yeah.
And the Bengals obviously have a lot of weaknesses there, but they put a sixth offensive lineman in 3 times, and they used 12 personnel a little bit. I want to say it was about 10 snaps when you look at the total of tight end snaps and subtract the number of base snaps. But they really did not make the effort that I expected to go heavy against the Ravens, really run the football. And when they did run the football, they obviously weren't very successful.
Yeah, they didn't, and I think I was a little confused even in the kind of the game plan. The types of plays that they ran. The prior 2 weeks, we saw a lot of screens and short passing game
Mm-hmm.
from the Chiefs, and even the Washington football team, but with their young quarterback. But you didn't see as much as that. They're really trying to play to their strengths, which was obviously Joe Burrow as a young but kind of mature for his age passer, and a good group of wide receivers.
Right. There was definitely a lot already in place to fear about Joe Burrow. He had a lot of success on intermediate passes. I got asked the question before the show is, would it have been a good idea to toss in some screen passes at the beginning if you were Cincinnati's offensive coordinator to try and get the defense back on its heels, back from constantly pressuring the pocket? And one of the interesting things about this game is the Ravens really opened up with some pass rushes that weren't all that exotic. They started the game with 7 consecutive 4-man rushes, and there was only 1 blitz and 1 stunt in that group in terms of deception. So really pretty vanilla stuff on the
Yeah.
first 7 snaps.
Yeah, it looked like they were just kind of trying to feel things out. You're facing a rookie quarterback for the first time, and like I said, they were able to get to him early and often. And once you're able to get with them with 4, I mean, why not bring more and up ante it up?
It's interesting because there's different things of schools of thought on that. If somebody says once you get to him with 4, just keep rushing 4, you got it. But if you're Rex Ryan, you say, well, once you get him with 4, send 8.
Yeah.
So that's great. I can see you're in the Rex Ryan camp. That's great. One other thing I want to talk about the roster management here is these rolling practice squad call-ups. The Ravens, one of the things I think it shows that now Dorsey is on the active roster after 2 weeks of being called up. He's only seen the field about 4 plays, but he's was called up after 2. Then they of course got Gilchrist, which seems to be a really terrific acquisition. I want to talk about a little bit later. Played a significant role in the dime defense in this package. They've protected a long snapper. It reminds me of the early days of the salary cap and the early days of the franchise tag, I should say, where it was immediately being applied to top linemen as opposed to franchise quarterbacks. And so the teams that kind of figured that out quickly were really ahead of the game. I can't continue but be amazed by the Ravens front office and how savvy they've handled this situation.
Yeah, this is a unique year, an unprecedented year, and you have to kind of think ahead of everyone to stay ahead of the curve. And kind of like you said, we've seen them protect a long snapper. If COVID hits and you lose Morgan Cox, I mean, you're lost. We see them keep Will Holden, offensive lineman that they have some faith in. So you're seeing them keep and protect positions where there's kind of a scarcity for competent players across the league, offensive lineman, defensive back as well.
Yeah, and offensive line, defensive line, both because of the additional type 2 diabetes risk. I think that was a lot of the reason for the opt-outs initially. So there was a disproportionate number of those. The Ravens figured that out, and they've held on to their linemen. They even made a roster move for Tristan Colon Castillo to protect. They didn't protect him. They elevated him from the practice squad, and then they deactivated him for this game. That's really understanding the rules.
Yeah, that's just, I mean, and I asked John Harbaugh about that, probably 30 minutes before they made that move, and he said, that's a strategic reason. It was reported that some AFC teams or some teams in the league were kind of sniffing and trying to sign him off the practice squad, so, you have to protect those guys that you see as valuable.
All right. Well, anyway, hopefully the Ravens can stay on top of things as much as they need to the rest of the way. Let's talk a little bit about that pass rush because that's the most fun thing about this entire game as far as I'm concerned. And we'll start with the fact that all 5 of the starting defensive backs had a sack in this game. Just amazing.
Yeah, I was wondering, when I saw that on the stat sheet a couple of minutes before the game ended, I was like, you don't see that often, and that just shows to how unique this defense is.
Right. According to Pro Football Reference, there had been only one other team in NFL history who'd had a sack from 4 different DBs in a postseason game, and that happened in the Green Bay-Philadelphia game in 2004. Green Bay had 4 defensive backs get a sack, and they still lost the game, 20-17 in overtime. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
But it had never happened during the regular season. So the record got bumped from 3 defensive backs being the most to 5 in 1 week. Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the only thing I can think of that's kind of even in the same category was when Ron Hunt, and you know that name? Okay.
It sounds familiar, but it might be it might be a little.
Oh, it's way before your time. Baseball player in 1971 got hit by the pitch 50 times, and the next highest in the league was 9. And the previous record, I forget what it was, but it's in the 20s, I think. Mm-hmm. And he smashed it. Anyway, this kind of thing. Just an outrageous day, and obviously by the end of this, it seemed like the Humphrey sack in particular, they were determined to get him a sack before the thing was over after they got one for everybody else in the starting lineup.
Yeah, I mean, when these guys are on the sideline, I mean, they can see stats, they see the stuff on the scoreboard and whatnot. So, of course, at that point, we heard a lot of times after the game, they're having fun with it. So, at that point, they're just trying to stack it up.
All right. Yeah, all kinds of fun, that's for sure. We saw some of the weirdest things you'll ever see in terms of blitzes. We saw a double outside corner blitz. Outside corner blitzes are tremendously rare. Last year, they ran one double outside corner blitz, and it's the first I'd ever seen as a football fan in my life.
I think I know what game you're referring to.
Go ahead, tell me.
Was it the Rams game?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
There we go.
And who got the sack?
Oh my goodness! It wasn't Jimmy, was it?
Jimmy Smith.
There we go.
So that time, the Rams ran play action in that game, and that really lends itself well to double outside corner blitzes, and of course that worked there. In this game, didn't have the benefit of play action. And there was so much push in the interior line that they got there anyway, and so that was really cool to see. That was the sack by Peters.
Yep.
That is Peters' first career sack, by the way. I don't know if that got reported anywhere, but he had never had one before. Yep. So some outrageous stuff there. I'm going to talk through a few of the other stats here, and then we'll get to some more discussion about this, Dan. Mm-hmm. The Ravens only allowed Burrow 7 of 37 ample time and space opportunities, so he dropped back 37 times. Only 7 of those, 19%. Did he have a 3-second pocket to throw from? That often includes a lot of ball out quick designations where the pocket would have broken down, but the ball was out quickly. Not too many in this game. The Ravens actually got a 59% pressure rate per dropback, which is outrageously high, highest I've seen in a long time. One more thing is that the Ravens had been really greasing it up with numbers prior to the Washington game, where they only rushed 31% 5+. This game was 17 out of 36, 46% using 5+, and that's in line with their season total today of 45%. So it wasn't like they used a ton of numbers, at least, but they did use a fair amount of scheme, and we'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
All right, nothing to say about that. It's cool. So all elements of deception were ratcheted way up. They had 19 blitzes from off the line of scrimmage. That's more than half a off the line of scrimmage blitz per play, where they had been down in the 0.2 and 0.25 range the last couple of weeks. 4 stunts. Now, that's not a lot of stunts, but they got home on 3 of them. 2 quarterback hits and a pass defensed. So the thing with stunts is you can't really always assimilate those with a blitz. So oftentimes the players on the field will have the ability to call the stunt themselves. And there's a video of Calais Campbell talking about this. But he says he can do it, but he's not allowed to if there's a blitz on the play otherwise. Because otherwise they have set responsibilities to set up that blitz and whatnot. So he can only call it when there's otherwise no blitz. They had 8 drops of 2+ from the line of scrimmage. Those are simulated pressures. And this is I wouldn't say that necessarily bothers Burrow as much as it bothers the offensive line. They have no idea how to get their blocking right if there's simulated pressure at the line of scrimmage. It's a very confused offensive line that didn't look like they had it together.
Yeah, we saw a lot of free rushes, especially on those, like you said, on those simulated pressures where, I think there was one where they blitzed Deshaun Elliott and he just went right up the B gap untouched. There were some plays where I was so surprised. I saw Matthew Judon drop back and he was about 10 yards downfield, in coverage. So they did a lot of unique blitz packages and schemes there.
Mm-hmm. The thing I've noticed in this game was that they lined up Judon and Bowser in the double A gap look, meaning inside of the outside rushers. It doesn't always mean in the A gap, but it could be in a B gap. But anyway, it's inside the outside rushers. Mm-hmm. And to me, I don't like that as much because I think it gives away that those guys are dropping into coverage. But still, that being the case, I don't think Cincinnati necessarily figured out. But I can tell you right now, anytime I see that, I say those guys are dropping into coverage. They're not rushing the passer from the inside. So,
Yeah.
all right, 8+ drops, 8 drops of 2+ from the line of scrimmage. Those are those simulated pressures where they're trying to show pressure that they don't necessarily bring the whole thing. They can, but most of the time, in these cases, they dropped from the line of scrimmage. We saw a lot of that have some real good effect. Clark had one of those on the Peters interception. Anything to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, they did a good job of just disguising a lot of stuff, just giving them different looks. I know there was one case where Deshaun Elliott came on a blitz and he got a sack, and I think I saw Matthew Judon about 10 yards, in coverage. So they did a really good job of those simulated pressures and just giving them different looks throughout the game.
Right. Anyway, the other thing I do is I log the deceptive blitzes, which are the plays that have 2 or more deceptive elements. So these are the most tricky that they get. And rather than tell you the sum total of these, I just want to read off the 9 times they did this. So these are the most deceptives. A pass middle for -2, a sack fumble for -6, incomplete pass, a sack for -9, a sack for -10, a pass middle for 11, a pass right for 3, a sack for -7, a sack for -8. So 9 plays, -28 yards, 5 sacks, 1 turnover. Absolute defensive coordinator's dream.
Yeah, he was. I mean, I don't know. I can't recall a game where Wink was probably having more fun. It's probably been a while since he had that much fun just calling it up.
Yeah, it does have to be fun for them, doesn't it? Um, it's a different pass rush scheme by week. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but they left Haskins kind of to make his own mistakes. Left him in a generally a cage to throw screen passes, throw the short crosses, and he had the shortest numbers you'll ever see. Until I saw, by the way, Alex Smith's numbers this week. He didn't throw a lot of passes, but his average completion was behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, that was. I mean, hey man, when you're coming off first game in 2 years, I mean, you're just trying to get through it and get your feet wet again. So
Yeah. I don't think they really changed the offense too much from the Haskins offense. I'll just say that with Alex Smith. So slightly different quarterback there. But anyway, I think Martindale's got a great job of tailoring it to each opponent. He didn't succeed obviously with Mahomes. Mahomes had the answer for every single one of these. That was the opposite of this game. And the 10 deceptive blitzes in the Mahomes game, Mahomes was 10 of 10 for 156. So that gives you an idea of just how much this can differ week to week. But
yeah,
against a young quarterback, this deception really seemed to work.
yeah.
All right, we're going to talk about some packages here for a minute, move on to that, and then we can talk whatever we need to. By the way, tangential storytelling, always appreciated, Dan. Jump right in. Don't feel like you need to stay on the topic I'm on exactly.
Mm.
But packages, we'll start with, they did not use the jumbo package at all. They used the base package 7 times. It's a package where they use it basically to respond to 6 offensive linemen being on the field, or they use it sometimes against 12 personnel, but not always against 12 personnel. So it's part of it is down in distance, but it's in part they could have been forced into the base defense a lot more by the Bengals in this game if the Bengals would have used heavier personnel. Put in Sam Hubbard at fullback is one thing they've done in the past, or used a second tight end more, or used a 6 offensive lineman more, and I think it could have been difficult for the Ravens.
Yeah, especially given their starting 5 issues along the offensive line.
All right. They're still using an alternate to their base defense when they kind of want the compromise between the base value against the run and the nickel that they need to cover 3 receivers. They've been using the jumbo nickel. And so when they use some 11 or in 12 personnel situations, they'll bring in this jumbo nickel where they put 3 defensive linemen on the field still, but rather than take a defensive back out of there to get the third defensive lineman, I should say, they take an inside linebacker out and they play with just 1. And in each of those cases, they played it 6 times. Queen was the guy. Those 6 plays went for 41 yards total during those plays. All right. Next thing, standard nickel. They played that 31 times. Standard nickel is the base defense that every NFL team uses to respond to 11 personnel on early downs. You respond maybe with a dime if it were a third and long or even a second and long maybe, or end of half, those kind of situations. But otherwise, use the standard nickel on an early down when you're not 100% sure whether the other team's going to run or pass. And it's the most important defense to play well in one sense, that you play it the most. It's not the most important defense to play well, some teams might say, because it's also not the highest leverage downs. But the Ravens really dominated with the standard nickel in this game. 31 plays, 106 yards, 3.4 yards per play. They got 3 other sacks with the standard nickel, and they held the Bengals to 2.9 yards per carry on those plays.
Yeah, in terms of coverage, this is where having 3 solid starting cornerbacks comes into play and just helps you a lot with what you can do.
Yeah, you trust those guys, and then the Ravens have just done a great job with their core 6 players always being good enough to throw a 6-man box at the opponent in 11 personnel and stop the run very effectively. Most offensive coordinators are thinking, I can force the other team to put a third cornerback on the field and give my running game an advantage because they don't really use a fullback or a tight end to block. They just want to spread the field. But in this case, the Ravens historically, really, and I'm glad to see them returning to it, these last couple of weeks, have just been outstanding at stopping the run with that standard nickel. All right. Now, as good as the nickel story was, the dime story was even better. They played 21 snaps of dime defense. That's 6 defensive backs. They have a couple different alignments of it. They did not play any race car this week, which is a 4 outside linebacker package with 1 defensive lineman. By the way, Dan, if you want a takeaway for this, that I'd love to hear the answer to. I'd love to hear what the Ravens call their 4 outside linebacker and 6 defensive back package. Okay, I've been calling it race car, but that, and now I've got everybody else calling it that way. But I'd love to hear what they do.
Yeah.
Anyway, they may not tell you.
I was gonna say I might have to ask Wink one day. I don't know if he told me on a conference call, but maybe if I get him one-on-one, you never know.
All right, I think if it's just terminology, it shouldn't be a problem. But who knows? Maybe it is. Anyway, total of 21 snaps of dime, only 37 total yards. To look at it in terms of the defensive wins here, they stopped the Bengals 12 times on 3rd and 4th down and allowed just 2 conversions, which is a big difference from a couple weeks ago against the Chiefs. And in terms of defensive wins, on the other 7 times they used it, which was early downs, all 7 of those were defensive wins by the Football Outsiders formula, meaning they didn't get the percentage of the yards to gain that they would have expected for the offense to win on any of those 7 plays. So remarkable day for the dime defense. And generally speaking, just package-wise, I think Wink had it pretty well squared away all over the board in this game.
Yeah, I was really intrigued with this package, just given obviously Marcus Gilchrist getting the call-up for this game. They used him in a lot of those situations.
Yeah, it's a good point. I forgot to mention it, that Jimmy Smith's role really changed in this game, didn't it? Because Marcus Gilchrist, brought up, is the new deep safety in the dime, and they do a little bit of rotation there, so Elliott gets a few of those deep snaps too, and Clark occasionally, but most of the time it was Gilchrist on the back end. That's a major addition because the Ravens really lacked another back end safety.
Yeah, this definitely, I know for this game, it seemed like it was more of a tactical change. Like I said, the Bengals have a good trio of wide receivers, especially, some guys outside in A.J. Green and T. Higgins. So, just knowing that you can put a big corner out there. Obviously, Jimmy Smith, he's been playing that hybrid role, and they had some depth issues at safety. So having Gilchrist up there, who's a veteran guy who's started a lot of games, really helps.
Dan, what do you know about the A.J. Green situation? Because he was in the neighborhood of both interceptions in this game, including the one that was called back that Clark had. And his effort was pedestrian on both of them. Yes, both before in terms of trying to make a play on the ball, which might have been difficult in either case, but even just tackling. I mean, come on, get after the guy with the football. Yeah. And then he was sitting on the bench later in the game. They mentioned an injury. I've heard that the Bengals reporters received some caginess, some saltiness from the coach regarding Green and his future there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we know last year, I mean, he was out the whole year with an injury, and just from what I've seen watching him before
Hmm.
this game on TV, I mean, he just looked like a guy who's kind of lost a step. Obviously, he's in a rebuilding situation with Cincinnati after so many years there, and it just seems like time has kind of run its course. He didn't look very energetic to be out there at all, and you're right. I saw a video of Zach Taylor. They were just kind of peppering him with questions about his injury and just what's been going on, and he just didn't seem very enthusiastic about the situation at all.
Yeah, hopefully this is something that fans and the Twitterverse is full of people who say the Ravens offense has to do something, damn it. We have to fix this offense. Come on, let's go out and get a wide receiver. There's so many of them out there on the anyway, just remember these guys who have been away from the game for a year and they're over 30, they're probably not going to be any good anymore. So you can apply what you've seen from AJ Green here, which there's some effort, but there's also some lost step, and there's some other issues there as well. You can apply that to Des Bryant. You can apply it to Jerry Rice if you want to go sign him, or Steve Largent if you want to get him and pass the COVID protocols at age 66. It's just not a reasonable thing to try and go after a receiver, I think, who's been out of the game for any period of time beyond age 30. I don't like ever signing on the free agent wide receiver treadmill, period, because of the cap implications.
Yeah.
But I really don't like it after 30 when they've missed time.
No, not at all. I mean, at this point, I know, especially after the offense's performances, there's probably some talk about bringing in a guy. I don't know too many guys on the, free agent market or even a trade market who are really gonna provide the immediate impact that the Ravens need at receiver.
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be a lot of guys on the trade market, which is kind of the good news. But it would be, the layer that anybody's going to want are those fourth-year players who are about to be a free agent, because the guys who are already making a lot of money, there's not going to be any real market for them, I don't think, with the COVID situation, the cap next year, the fact that you're spending dollars. But I think that there probably is draft capital be traded for somebody who doesn't make a whole lot of money right now. So second round, third round original receiver who's in his fourth year, maybe even his third year. There's a market for that right now, I think.
You would think they'd probably want to haul though, and obviously Eric DeCosta and the Ravens, they're not the ones to give up high draft picks.
No, there you go. I'm sure they'll be offering a 5 for if your franchise player is coming here. So anyway, great trade. All right, so let's do this if we would. I know there's probably a lot of players you want to talk about on defense, and I have the same, but bring up a player, and then you'll make your points about him. I'll try and respond, and then I'll bring up the next one. We'll alternate like that.
Yeah, I guess one guy to start off with is Pernell McPhee. I had the game of the year to date. Maybe his best game since he came back to the Ravens last year. I mean, we got him on a conference call a couple of days before the game, and he was talking about how so some guys were kind of ticked off about the pass rush. Obviously, they weren't bringing the quarterback down as much as possible, and he was really active, rushing inside and outside. Some of the clips I saw, it wasn't just scheme, but it was him individually beating guys one-on-one. So I know that had to be really good to see.
Yeah, honestly, looked to me like he stepped right out of 2014 for this game. I agree with you completely. It was his best game since he returned to the Ravens. 2014, I've never been sorrier to lose a player than the loss of McPhee after that season, because even though Dumerville and Suggs, padded their stack totals tremendously, it was because they were consistently getting these one-on-one opportunities because McPhee was so dominant on the inside. Yeah. Nobody could cross your face with that thunderous first step like Purnell. We saw a lot of that. I'm not going to say we saw a lot of the thunderous first step in this game. We saw a lot of the violent hands that are still there for him. Yeah. And nobody's going to say he's still got the same step after all the knee problems and whatnot, but boy, the guy can still play football, and I'm so glad to see him come out with a big game like this. And they couldn't block him.
Not at all.
All right, my turn to name one. We'll go with let's go with Deshaun Elliott. Now, I loved what he's done in general this year. I think we've seen a lot of flash from him on the back end in terms of the range he can have, although he hasn't really made a play yet on the back end. I love when they rotate him what he can do at the line of scrimmage. He's got that very snaky quickness about him that allows him to choose a gap, B or C, to blitz from. And obviously, if that defensive lineman fans out that offensive tackle, that usually creates a good B gap opportunity. Yeah. Lardarius Webb had some of that before, but I really see it from Elliott. And it got kind of lost in the shuffle here, but Elliott had 3 consecutive drive-ending pressures, which is unbelievable for a safety to do that. It was pressure, pressure, sack to end 3 straight drives at one point.
No, he's done a great job, and we saw that against Houston in week 2 when I think it was a fourth down play where I think he may have been the one to blitz on fourth and short. I may be getting it mixed up, and then like you said with the kind of rushing up the BC gap, that was referring to that a couple minutes back with one of his sacks.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I remember the play. So it was like a 4th and 1
They kind of did like
between
a
the
rollout.
35 and 40 yard line.
Yeah, they kind of the play action rollout, and he messed up Deshaun Watson's rhythm, and he kind of threw it into the dirt.
Yeah, yeah, great play. Your turn.
Let's see. I guess we got to talk about Patrick Queen. He's had a really strong 2-game stretch, especially after the Kansas City game where he struggled a bit. I think it's clear through a little over a quarter of the season where his strong suits is. He's extremely active.
Mhm.
He's a really solid blitzer, great in run support. I think that we some of the issues in pass coverage, we didn't see that as much. I think it's kind of twofold. I think that the Bengals probably didn't target him and kind of try to get him in those one-on-one situations with Mixon or Bernard as much as they probably could have. But I think the biggest thing we can say about him is just he's extremely active. I mean, the sideline to sideline speed that you want in a 2020 inside linebacker, he has it. I'm just kind of always impressed by when there's a play to be made, he's somewhere there, whether it's the sack, whether it's a tackle, or we saw in the scoop and score, just being around the ball and making that play.
Yeah, even the forced fumble, really high motor play where it was a very extended pocket. It was ample time and space actually for Burrow, one of the 7 times he had it in the game, and he came right up his back. It's funny because Maureen and I watched the game and we're trying to record the players as we go rather than have to do it all after the game. Okay, so there's some of this going on, and so I had the thing stopped, and I saw Queen was like 5 yards away and behind Burrow, and I'm like, he's gonna sack him. He better go for the club on the shot. And he didn't go for the club. It was the weirdest thing. He just went directly into his back, and somehow that ball came loose anyway. But it was good to see.
Yeah, he just kind of laid a mean shoulder into him. But I mean, that was a mean shoulder
hit.
Yeah,
big hit. I love what he's been doing in terms of he's a gambling run player. I would define him as right now. He knows the basic stuff to do in terms of being disciplined on the back end. We saw one such tackle last week for loss. But I think I would not characterize him as a great scheme run defender right now. So he's a playmaking run defender, and I do really love that about him. What I was very frustrated about, and it was really the central point of my piece last week, was how many times other Ravens had used body language at him on the field. It's very clear on the tape. They're pointing at him for you got to be here, and there was one of those in this game. Fort pointed at him, and he obviously expected him to be somewhere else. I don't know whether he was supposed to be where Fort was or covering a tight end who was absolutely uncovered on the left side, who fortunately the ball didn't go to. But either way, there's a lot of gesticulation still going on. I think he might have been the guy who was supposed to be covering Mixon on the big miss in this game by Burrow, the overthrow. It was only about 7 yards downfield, but it would have been a huge play. It was lots of open space behind him.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was him, but I mean, he talked about it. The week leading up to the game, just he's still kind of getting used to the speed of the game and a lot of the route combinations that you have to get accustomed to when you're playing coverage in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I separate him from other linebackers because he's trying to learn the route combinations in front of him. Like, who do I cover coming off the line of scrimmage from a bunch formation? Or how do I stay in my zone and not go for the candy, as he called it, the guy cutting in front of me through my zone? When do I not chase him, kind of thing? Well, anyway, he needs to figure out that. Then there's a whole nother layer, which is the things they accused C.J. Mosley of not really understanding, which is pile of crap, was that he didn't understand the route combinations going on behind him, and that takes a lot of experience, reading the quarterback, looking at how the receivers lined up the line of scrimmage, just knowing kind of what the possible route combinations are and where you can go to get in the passing lane and whatnot. That's very complex, and Mosley was actually very good at it. He just was forced to do it all the time with the Ravens.
Yeah, we see how good Marcus Peters is at at that, working at kind of like an outside corner position. So I can only imagine how hard it is when you're in the center of the defense and you've got all those guys coming forward at you and crossing by you.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. You did Patrick Queen, so I'll
Yeah,
pick one. Real happy to see the debut of Matabike. He didn't make the stat sheet in a lot of ways, but the base defense was strong when he was out there. He played all early downs, only 1/3 down the whole game. So they use him more as a run defender. Not a ton of opportunity to rush the passer, but he did on one of his early plays, his 6th NFL snap. He got the quarterback hit. Just good to see him lay one into a quarterback early on. And I think we got a little bit of a view of that big boy speed they like from him. He's about a 4.80, 3.40, if I recall, which is lightning quick for a man his size.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Ravens definitely coming into the season, they had a need for some, not only pass rush, but pass rush specifically up the middle. You'd hope maybe Brandon Williams can provide a little bit more. He's been trying to get that for years. But really outside of Pernell McPhee and some packages, they really don't have that. So hopefully he can kind of come on and provide a little bit of impact in the pass rush as well.
Yeah, it's exciting because they really picked up some players who are good interior stunt guys. And Matabike, I think, is an under or an over guy. He can loop or he can be the under guy. Campbell, fantastic under guy and a pretty good over guy. And Wolf, a fantastic under guy. He's the guy who really wants to be making first contact, setting somebody else up. We've already seen a couple times, including Patrick Queen's first sack, where he really looked good doing that.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. You brought that. I brought up Matabike. Your turn now.
Yeah. I guess we can do Judon. I mean, I know as the franchise tag $16.8 million guy, he's always a source of criticism or praise depending on how he plays. I think that he had another strong effort. It wasn't the type of game where he racked up a whole bunch of sacks, but I think he got a lot of good pressure. I think sacks is kind of an antiquated. I wrote about it about a week or two ago. Sacks is kind of an antiquated way of judging a pass rusher's value, and him specifically in this system, he's asked to do so much. But we saw a lot of the good first step, good pass rush, getting Burrow off kilter. I think there was one where he had Burrow around the neck, and Burrow was able to escape it, but then he chased down the check down to Joe Mixon where he only got like a 2-yard gain. Again, we saw him drop in coverage a lot, and that's who he is. I saw a piece. I'm blanking on where it was from, so I apologize. But it was just talking about how Judon doesn't get nearly as many of the pure pass rush situations as some of the best edge rushers in the league. So I mean, he's in a different situation in Baltimore and in this scheme specifically.
Yeah, and he could get salty about that in terms of not having the great opportunities because he's definitely a guy that they use in simulated pressure situations to drop to coverage, and oftentimes they're dropping him to coverage so they can blitz a slot corner or a safety off the edge or whatever, and that's somebody who's eating off his plate in a sense in terms of getting the sack totals. But the NFL teams are a lot more savvy than that, I think, in terms of who they sign, and they would look at a player like Judon and understand his scheme value to a defense, and also what additional value he'd have if you used him just as a pure pass rusher. Yeah. I can't put a complete green light on this game here. He had 2 very costly defensive offsides. One of them was really him and Clark on a hard count. I didn't think his pressure rate was nearly enough for a game where he had I forget whether it was 20. He's on the field for 25 pass snaps, I believe, and I think he might have had 5 drops to coverage that I had, which is still a lot, but it's he should have had more pressure, I would think, in a game like this where he's working against literally the 2 worst tackles in the league. It's Bobby Hart and Jonah Williams, who's supposed to be good, but is a rookie and he's not there yet, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair criticism, and that's also kind of one of the things. You have to take the good with the bad with Judon. He's susceptible to a lot of those kind of like silly ticky-tack penalties. We saw that a lot when they play the Chiefs, and he kind of gets a 15-yard personal foul penalty. So you gotta, like I said, you gotta take the good with the bad when it comes to him.
Yeah, all right. Big week last year, obviously. Big week last week against Washington. It was last week, right? They had 5 quarterback hits. Yeah. All right. So different guy every week. All right, I'm going to talk about Tyus Bowser here for a minute because I thought his game was just terrific. Mm-hmm. He is really doing it all right now because if you look at he dropped the coverage, I forget it was 10 or 11 times, but it was a terrific day in coverage. He rushed the passer very effectively when he did. He had 2 quarterback hits. One of them got washed out by penalty. He had A wonderful game of run defense, and we take notes on every play, of course, as we go through. And one of the things we noted was three really great edge notes during the game for Bowser, holding off big men to do it. One time he stonewalled a pulling guard and just like flipped him away. It's just the kind of thing you don't see. But anyway, I thought a terrific game of edge setting for Bowser, and we hadn't seen too many great games of that type from him before.
Yeah, I think that obviously in this fourth year contract year, you'd probably want to see the real pass rushing pop out, and I think he's tied for the team league with two, but he really is developing into that all around linebacker, kind of like an every down type linebacker that you'd like to see. I think he's progressing really well so far this season.
What, have you heard any rumors around the castle about a possible early extension of him?
I haven't personally, but I mean, it's always a possibility. I know that obviously, there's a lot of guys that are left that are up next. I don't know how many people saw the Marlon Humphrey extension coming at the moment
Mm.
in which it did. So you never know.
Okay, so it seems like there'd be two guys who'd be exceptionally angry and reasons why they wouldn't want to do it in season. Obviously, Judon would be upset if they sign a different Sam linebacker to a large contract. It almost certainly means he's gone. But
Yeah.
but the other guy who would probably be upset is Ronnie Stanley, who already kind of got cut in line by Humphrey in a sense that he was drafted a year earlier and might have expected to get his contract. And I know in Stanley's case, it's the word out is that the two sides are fairly far apart at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we saw Laramie Tunsil get about, I think it was over $20 million a
Mm.
year, that might be the floor for Stanley at this point. That is really that's a big price to play for an offensive tackle as important as they are. I know, well, we're still a ways away from free agency and what could happen. Maybe the Ravens could kind of up their price at this point, but I mean, I think that they are. What I sense is that they are far apart right now.
Right. I mean, this is a conversation I always have, but Pat Kerwin also talks about it. Is if you're Stanley, you're facing two consecutive franchise years before you make the kind of money that Tunsil did.
Yeah.
So if he really wants to go there, I mean, it doesn't matter what Bob signed Tunsil for. If the COVID market just won't support that kind of number, there's not going to be any teams with cash this off season, or there's not going to be very many that are going to be able to give Stanley the kind of money he wants. The contract basis has to be what would you make in the franchise year the first time? What would you make in the franchise year if we did it to you again? And then what's your market value after that? And I think that really comes in to about a 5-year contract at about $100 million. I don't think it's 120 million, which is probably what he wants, or even 110 million, which would match the Tunsil amount with 2 extra years tacked onto it, which would really be cheaper than Tunsil. But I think it's more like 100 million, and it's just a function of the COVID environment at this point.
Yeah, I think we're gonna see. I mean, obviously, I think just generally speaking, in normal situations, the franchise has a lot of the leverage, but
Mhm.
the way the cap is looking to be set up in the next year or two, it's really gonna be tough for guys to get those record breaking and groundbreaking deals that they're seeking to kind of reset the market.
Mhm. All right, let's see. So we talked to I picked Bowser. You got any Bowser you want to talk about?
I think Jalen Ferguson. I know he was a guy that popped out a lot. And I think we've kind of seen this, in his a little bit of year plus. Just he's really excelled and progressed well as a setting the edge
Yeah.
in run situations. I know he had a really nice play on the Ravens sideline, kind of shedding I believe it was the tackle and putting a nice hit on Mixon into the sideline. He got a lot of helmet slaps and whatnot. I think the pass rush is still a work in progress. I think coming into the league, he was a guy who really depended on his strength in that bull rush, and obviously, the guys on the NFL level have the strength to match up. I think he's still his arsenal in a sense, his pass rush bag of tricks is still a work in progress. But in terms of being a good run defender, I think he's really progressing well, and I think in the past weeks we've seen his snaps kind of indicate that as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. 24 snaps in this game, 6 tackles he was involved in, and I'm sorry, I think it's 6 wins as a run defender, which is remarkable total, by the way, for an outside linebacker. Very difficult to ever get that high. But I think back for this guy, this is the 5th game of 2020. If you look back 5 games from the end of 2019, he was yanked
Yeah.
from a game against San Francisco for not defending the edge well, and they had 35 minutes. They had their way with him as an edge setter before they pulled him and said, "Hey, we just can't do it anymore. Ward's in there for you now."
Yeah.
And I still kind of remember the surprised look on his face when he left the field, but he improved last year as a run defender towards the end of the year, and he's completely upped his game over the offseason in terms of what he does against the run.
Yeah, most
I agree with
definitely.
you. Agree with your comments completely about the pass rush as well. Hopefully he can learn more, to be a violent hand player from a player like McPhee. You never know how much these guys really are willing to share, but it seems like a logical guy to learn from is a guy like McPhee who uses his hands very well to try and teach Ferguson a few tricks.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we need to talk about Marcus Peters because we didn't see him for a lot of the game, and that's usually a good thing on a cornerback. He wasn't targeted a lot. 26-yard throw on the outside early on was the Bengals' longest throw. He's a little bit soft on that, but that was one. And after that, he was just around the football. He obviously on the one quarterback hit by Clark, yep, where the ball got thrown up in the middle of the field by Burrow. He was, of course, right in position to be there.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen. I mean, it's kind of remarkable how seamless he's transitioned, or he's kind of kind of gelled into this defense since that midseason trade, and I think that now in his first full season, we're kind of just seeing. Now that he's settled, he knows everything. We're seeing it kind of open up. I don't ever recall him doing the stuff he was doing, blitz wise. With Kansas City or the
Yeah.
Rams. So, when you come to this team, you're not restricted to what you did with pass teams at all.
Yeah, it's a great fit for Peters because he is a gambler. The thing, people have an inherent dislike for gamblers because I think they weigh more heavily the losses as opposed to the wins. I mean, there's plenty of wins with Peters, but that's who he is. That's the exchange you're making, and he doesn't have to succeed in a lot of those to make it be a very good gamble. Oftentimes, it's way less than 50% of the time he has to be right when he goes to try and make a play. But of course, he gets toasted as soon as he misses one and gives up an extra 25 yards on the back end of that play. Uh, you know, I, I personally I love it, and I think it fits extremely well here with a high pressure defense that he can
Yeah,
undercut a lot of routes.
I was just about to say that exactly. I mean, I think the Chiefs game from week 3, 2 weeks ago was probably the worst we've
Yes.
seen of the gambling.
Hmm.
Before, it might be a 20-25 yard gain, but it's usually not that bad just given the nature of this defense, and then he has that that kind of like that security blanket from the front seven.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really what it is, isn't it? Usually, it's the back end that's a security blanket for a pass rush that's not getting home, but not this time. This is really he uses the aggressiveness of that pass rush.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Anybody else you want to hit on? I have Jimmy Smith on my list still. Can we talk about him for a second?
Yeah, I think we're seeing. Well, I think coming into this year, you definitely were kind of intrigued with the way that he was going to be used. And they're kind of using him as a matchup, just a matchup piece. Early in the year, we see, or the first couple of weeks of the season, we see him kind of a more of a dime linebacker type role, safety role close to the line of scrimmage, covering tight ends. We saw him on Travis Kelsey a lot 2 weeks
Hmm.
ago, and now, like I said, with them playing a lot of that 11 personnel and having those 3 wide receivers out, we see him as a kind of back to his old role as a outside cornerback. I think he played really well. I mean, obviously AJ Green. We talked about his situation, not too long ago, but I think he did really well in coverage, and I think we're gonna see this rotate. We're gonna see him as kind of like a. I'm trying to think. I'm not a baseball guy, but
Platooning.
yeah, or a utility player. He can do a lot of different things on a week to week basis.
Yeah, it's you make an interesting point there, and this is something I really want to talk about. Is I think the move back to outside corner is probably permanent right now, and the reason I think it is because I think Gilchrist fits the need at safety that they had for a guy who can play the back end. I hope that guy was Geno Stone, but obviously for whatever reason the Ravens don't believe that he was ready for it, and they were willing to expose him to the waiver wire to do so. So Gilchrist, not your typical practice squad player, I think we'll agree. Almost 32 years old, and he's been in the league for 10 years. Very unusual guy to have on your practice squad, but also a very experienced safety with 125 games or maybe 127 games of NFL experience. It's a good guy to have on the back end. It's a guy who is going to understand what the route concepts are and where his best chance is to get in on a play. Hopefully he has the instincts that he and still some of the speed he had as a young man to really contribute to that.
Yeah, and like you said, it will be interesting to see if they do stick with that. Obviously, Anthony Averett played a career high. I think he may have played around 60 snaps last week or against Washington as an outside corner, and he was matched up against Terry McLaurin. I think they kind of picked on him a little bit. He didn't give up any large gains in coverage, but that will be interesting to see how they treat that outside corner role.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with him with Averett at all. So I don't want to make that thing. I think he's actually pretty good. The problem is Smith is just too damn valuable as a fourth corner, and he has less injury risk out there. So if you put Smith at safety, even if you put him on the back end, there's going to be some hitting involved. I mean, hey, the free safety is the last line of defense. If you has to make a number of tackles, corners do too, but they don't generally get involved in the run game. In fact, a lot of teams will just tell their corners, don't run into a multi-person pile because we don't want you in there and getting hurt.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. Yeah.
All right. We usually do some stars of the week at this point, Dan. Do you want to play along and have a 3-2-1 list with me, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, let's do it. 3-2-1 as 3-3-2-2-1-1 or.
Yeah, there you go. You're number three guy. Who you got?
Oh man, let's see. Number 3. I know who I got at 2 is 2 and 1. 3. I mean, I'll go with Marlon Humphrey, number 3. Just once again, just kind of being around the ball. Again, sticking with that slot role. He had a tough matchup with Tyler Boyd, but I don't think he gave up too much in the coverage, and obviously kind of the hammer on the nail at the end of the game, getting another punch out. It's kind of, like I said, remarkable again how he's able to do that just on a week-to-week basis. So I think 3 I'll give to Marlon Humphrey.
Yeah, great choice. He had another great game, and he tried 2 punch outs before he got the one bingo or Yahtzee or whatever you want to call it when the ball came loose. But boy, though, he's just got an absolute baseball bat for a right arm. It's just so much fun to see him use it, whether it's in pass defense or there. I'd really still like to see him more on the boundary. I don't think his assets are being as well used at slot corner. But one of the nice things about it is when he is at slot corner, there's more opportunities for these punch out plays.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're seeing a stat where, we're seeing more of the top receivers shifted inside slot. There's obviously the league is passing more to slot receivers. So obviously his strong suit, he's naturally an outside corner, but I think that obviously he has just tremendous value as well in the slot.
All right, my number 3 guy is Marcus Peters. We talked about most of the things he did, but we didn't talk about the sack for a minute. Double outside corner blitz, him and Averett coming on this sack. And he was kind of pushed by the play, although he did get the initial pressure, forced Burrow to step up in the pocket, but he was pushed by it. He kept the motor going just like Patrick Queen did, came back on the play from behind, knocked the ball loose, and that ball trickled around for touched by about 4 or 5 Ravens before it went out of bounds.
Yeah, you were waiting for somebody to pick it up. Just kind of piggybacking off that. We talked about earlier how the last time we believe they did that was against the Rams last year. I think what really helps is the Rams are often known to run that bunch. Not bunch, but that closed, that tight formation with their receivers. I think that on that Peters blitz, we saw that as well. So obviously it helps when you have a shorter route to the quarterback there.
Right. Yeah. So obviously, the receiver being as a little closer makes it a little better. Dan, I'm going to tell you, I believe those to be the only 2 times it's been done in Ravens history. Martindale's only done it twice in 3 years. I know that for certain. I've database of every play going back to the beginning. I certainly can't remember another. And if you look at the total number of times that outside corners blitzes, it's single digits per year, and often 1 or 2 or 4 if you're working with Rex Ryan. Samari Roll had a sack, but it wasn't a double corner blitz. I went back and I checked that one in 2006. Various things. I've gone back to try and see if they've ever had other double corner blitz coming at the same time, but it just doesn't happen. It's like the rarest of all football plays. It's what would be the equivalent? Oh, it doesn't matter. Anyway, very rare football play. All right, let's see. That was my number 3 guy, right, Peter? So you got your number 2 guy.
Yeah, 2. I'll go with Patrick Queen. Again, just the way he's progressed. Real quickly over the quarter and 1 game of the season. I think that over the next 11 games, you'd love to see a lot of improvement in that pass coverage, and show him kind of get used to some of those combination routes and whatnot. But just I think. I'm trying to think. Is he a better blitzer? Is he better in run support? I think right now just blitzing has really been his most valuable attribute. We saw how LJ Fort was kind of used really successfully as a blitzer last year. Patrick Oyefusi, he just picked up in that aspect as well.
Yeah, it's Queen's ascent is unbelievable. It's really hard to chart because a lot of players have a relatively slow growth rate of 4 or 5% better per year for a while until they hit an age where they start declining, and Patrick Queen looks like he's improving by 20% per game, kind of thing. It's like there's huge new revelations about him each week, and that's obviously something very exciting. Guy didn't have hardly any experience playing inside linebacker when the Ravens drafted him. Not even a full season worth of snaps at the college level. And, it's really exciting to see a guy progress as much as he has in these few weeks. So, anyway, he was my number 2 guy as well. Who's your number 1?
I think it has to go to Pernell McPhee. Like you said, he turned back the hands of time. And again, like I said before, I was just equally impressed as we see him as kind of providing an interior pass rush. But he did great on the edge as well and going 1-on-1 against tackles. And you said talking about using his hands and whatnot to be able to get these big guys off of him. He just had a great game, and hopefully I don't know if we'll see as many games just like we saw again on Sunday, but if he can provide some type of pass rush, especially inside, I think that'll go a long way to helping the overall defense.
Yeah, and that's really when they need it most, is on those third down plays and the dime package plays when he moves to bumps to the inside instead of playing on the outside. So I was so happy to see it. He's an older player, so in a sense he's not a developmental guy, but another guy, it really makes you wonder, does he have another year left after this? He could be around again. He could be a reasonable option. The Ravens are going to lose 2 Sam linebackers next year. McPhee's a rush linebacker, but he's also a very versatile, as you mentioned, interior piece as well to give you hopefully some rush in there, and the Ravens need that. Boy, it would be really great if that would be a player who could play another year at this point.
Yeah, we all know he was having a strong start to the season last year before that triceps injury against Seattle. So I think he's kind of starting to pick right up where he left.
All right, Josh, what do we got in the mailbag?
All right, we got a little bit in the mailbag that we're going to get to. I could not find the stat about the field goal in under a minute.
Okay.
Was not able to find that, but right when we started recording, the NFL did announce that they will now be doing game day PCR COVID testing for all players and key employees.
Wow.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that's going to be interesting because that means we could see some scratches Sunday morning.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get to the mailbag. A lot of if there's a theme for the mailbag, it is people trying to figure out who the Ravens are.
Okay. So if there are offensive identity questions, we're going to save them for tomorrow night.
So we're going to go broad, and we're going to start with and we're going to focus on the defense today. There's plenty of questions for the offense we'll get to tomorrow. The defense, let's start broad. Is this a Super Bowl caliber defense?
Yes.
I will say yes.
All right. All right. There's a simple one. All right. Then
they literally do everything well. Let's just give this guy a little more credit for his question here. But they do everything well at all 3 levels. The only question is really about the pass rush. They're built back to front. So because they spend less money on the pass rush itself, they're going to have to scheme for rush more than otherwise. And as we talked about earlier, the scheme that Martindale has thrown out there has generally been extremely good. Obviously, with the one exception being Mahomes and how he carved apart, what Martindale threw at him.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing. I mean, there's very few teams that are equipped to do what the Chiefs did. So I think that's. I mean, if you're looking for one, sliver of optimism, I think that's one that you can count on.
All right, and like I said, we're going to dig into this a little bit as we try to figure out who this team is, which brings us to Andrew wondering about the elephant in the room, the Chiefs. Baltimore defense has looked great the last 2 weeks, but the Kansas City offense has only looked pretty good. Yet Kansas City demolished Baltimore. Was that just a bad matchup? Is it that we blitzed too much? What can we do to stop Mahomes?
I'll start on this, Dan. I mean, the Oakland did a lot of laying back and letting him play in the cage, which is unusual. I think that the Ravens have usually gone after the quarterback, tried to make sure that their secondary is in the best possible position to get a pass that's thrown up. We saw a lot of cover zero blitzes at the end of 2018 and at the end of 2019. So I thought that, that's just the Ravens' DNA and who they are. But does that mean I don't think they'll play differently the next time? I think they'll play very differently the next time against Mahomes. I don't think they'll grease up with the same level of pass rush scheme at all after getting taken to the woodshed the way they were in this game.
Correct, and just kind of going back to the Chiefs game before the Ravens game, they played the Chargers. The Chargers ran a lot of zone cover 3, just making sure that nothing got over the top of them, and they relied on their front 4, and they have a good front as well. So I think that, like you said, we'll see them play differently, but also, especially up front, you're going to need to see better production from some of those guys.
All right, pending tonight's game, the Ravens are the clear leader of the NFL in point differential. Is it just me, this is coming from Spencer, or is the team clearly better than a lot of fans seem to realize? Is it elevated expectations from 2019?
Yeah, I definitely think it's elevated, expectations from 2019 when you have the regular season that they had, and their season comes to an end the way it did. Obviously, people are gonna be clamoring for you to pick up where you left off. I think obviously there's some new pieces. You lost Marshall Yanda, and they're trying to incorporate some new pieces on the offense. I think that we're kind of underestimating how good this team is. I think that they kind of sleepwalked, at least on offense, through the Bengals game, and they were able to beat them. I think that this is clearly, one of the best, top 5, if not a top 2 or 3 team in the league.
Yeah, I mean, in on both sides of the ball combined, I definitely agree, and including special teams in that. I'm not sure they're a top 3 offense, and I'm not sure it really matters that much. They were a historic offense last year. You couldn't have anything but expectations that were too high coming in if you're a Ravens fan, because you never want to allow for any amount of regression to the mean. For players, just the league having a lot more to figure out about Jackson than Jackson has to figure out the league. Yeah. I mean, Jackson's so far ahead of everybody in terms of the league, but the league is, has a lot of room to gain, and it's always the group that's behind, tends to make up more ground.
Yeah, and obviously we're not going to see the numbers per se that we saw last year, but I mean, if we're seeing them, improve or maintain the level that they played situationally, third down, the way that they were converting drives and the time of possession on offense, specifically, I think that we can consider, this year a success, and that they, kind of improved in terms of their play.
All right, so you guys are both saying it's that this is a great defense, Super Bowl caliber defense. Is anything missing from this defense? Ken, you teased J.J. Watt last week.
It'd be fun. J.J. Watt would cost about $11.85 million, I think it is, or maybe it's slightly less than that, because I think I had him figured for 13 weeks. But now it's 12/17 of his salary. It has to be picked up, and then the whole thing next year. I don't think the Ravens will do it. I think it's probably too much injury risk for them, and it's too much COVID risk this year of all things not playing out normally. And maybe, I think there's probably a 90% chance there is a Super Bowl. Okay, I can't give it 100 right now, but I'm going to say 90. But I think there's only probably a 75% chance that the season works out the way the Ravens expect, in terms of having all their pieces together, all their players together at the right time to make their Super Bowl push. So I think you got to take that into account, and I'm layered. That's the additional layered COVID risk, and not just the normal injury risk that every team faces every year.
Yeah, I mean, I see that for the most part, this is the team that we see right now is the team that we're gonna see, for the rest of the season. For barring any injuries, I don't think that there are any glaring weaknesses that we saw last year, where you had to bring in a Josh Bynes or a LJ Ford to kind of shore up any position. If anything, it's just kind of all those pieces coming together and getting better as the season progresses.
Yeah, in a sense, I look at the Marcus Gilchrist move as being very much like Domata Pecco or very much like LJ Ford or Josh Bynes. I mean, it's fewer snaps, but they're very important snaps because it's the dime defense. That's your closer. For the defense, they have to get the other team off the field, a high percentage of the time. So I'm optimistic anyway about where the Ravens are. I think there'll be more of the small moves. I don't see any big moves.
Yeah, same here.
All right, that's the mailbag. Remember to get in your questions using the hashtag FilmStudyMailbag over on Twitter, and get in all your offensive questions about Lamar and his struggles, because we'll go over that in detail tomorrow. Dan, how can people follow you on Twitter? Obviously, they can read your writings over at the Sun and BaltimoreSun.com.
Yeah, on Twitter.
Anything else to promote?
Yeah, just my Twitter. My first and last name, Daniel Oyefusi, Oyefusi, and then obviously Baltimore Sun, BaltimoreSun.com.
All right, and Ken, you'll definitely be tagging Daniel as this podcast is out over on Twitter.
Oh, absolutely. And Dan, I want to just say I've really enjoyed the Suns coverage. I'm still one of those old fogies who likes to get up and read the newspaper. A lot of people read it online now, I'm told. Yeah. We still get it, at our home. It's kind of weird, but we do. And it's a big deal when the paper gets here and I hear the slap out at 4:30 because I'm still up, and then I run out and get it, and I have my cereal and whatnot. But the thing I want to say about it was I think the writing at the Sun is at a very high level right now, which is hard to do, I think, in print journalism to get good people. But maybe one of the things you're getting some younger folks probably, but just some very good analysts to look at the game. I've really enjoyed what Jonas has done in terms of his technical level. I like your writing too. I think that some of the stuff that Childs puts together for the game is good. Anyway, I've really enjoyed it all, and I'm enjoying the Sun more than I have in a long time.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
How much do Daniel? How much do you and Jonas argue over Mike Preston's grades when he puts them out?
I don't know if I'm supposed to be saying this. Mike actually checks in with me. He doesn't check in with Jonas. So I mean, when you see the grades, that's a little bit of my flavor going into that.
All right.
So I should hit you on Twitter because I bet Mike Preston doesn't even have a Twitter account.
He does have a Twitter account, but he doesn't check it as much as me.
Okay.
All right, I know those are always. I always enjoy the Mike Preston grades because no one's ever happy with them.
Yeah.
It's always causes a lot of conflict.
Yeah.
Ken, tomorrow night we've got the offensive podcast. Who's joining us then?
Tomorrow night is Michael Crawford for the offensive pod, so everybody's always excited for that. Always one of our favorite guests.
All right, that one will be out around 2 a.m.
2 a.m. on Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
Wait, Wednesday morning.
Wednesday morning. Because we'll start recording at 10, and with Michael, you guys will go until 1.
So it's a pre-complaint. Actually, we moved that show up to 9:30 recording for just that reason, I'm told, to give you the editing time you need. But you're right. We're both talkers. Dan, you obviously got a taste of that tonight. Sorry about that, buddy.
It's all good. That'll be a great show. I'm excited to get Michael in here. It's always. Those shows go long because it's always great content when Michael.
Yeah, I mean, what do you have that cot in your studio for anyway, if it's not to take a little nap during our show?
Well, I did check my phone earlier today because I thought that Indiana was in like the central time zone, so I thought I was gaining some extra time. Turns out they're in East Coast City. I don't know my geography.
Yeah, I don't either, so you're all good.
All right. We also have the article up on the website now, breaking down the defense and going into a lot more detail, as well as the Situation Room came out with a new episode on Monday morning. Remember, you can follow them on Twitter and on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts and wherever you get your podcasts, as well as FilmStudyBaltimore.com to listen to Gabe and Jordan do a great podcast over there.
We're still working on a Know Your Foe guest for Wednesday for the Eagles. We have By the Numbers coming up on Thursday with Dan Reese. That'll be out either late Thursday or early Friday for your podcast enjoyment too. Give that one a chance, guys. The numbers on that, very fast-paced, 10 or 15-minute total pod, but there's a lot of very dense information in there that I think people will like.
Yeah, plenty of content to fill up your podcast player. We've got something every day for you, so make sure you're always checking that out. So, And there's a new Section 336 out now as well if you want to get in a little Orioles talk. There's some Ravens talk in there too, but not as detailed
Fall
as this.
instructional league stuff?
A little fall instructional league, a little bit of off-season moves, preparing for what did we learn from a 60-game season? Did we learn anything, or was it too short? And all of that type of stuff. So check out Section 336 for some Orioles talk. So, all right, guys. Well, we will talk again soon.